Next phase. Okay, fellas. Interesting thing about our society over the last 5,000 years or so. We've codified women into two categories. Oh, someone's at the door. I can tell someone's at the door. We've codified women into two categories. All women who have sex fall into one of these two categories, and then perhaps one of the branches underneath. But it's going to be very clear. All women are divided into one of these two. And I'm not going to tell you what they are right now because I don't want the girls throwing their shoes at me. Two categories. First one I'm going to ask you fellas, think about this for a moment. I'm going to describe a woman to you. She's a girl who has sex entirely because she enjoys it. She has sex with whatever guy she finds amusing to her at the time. She does it because she wants the guy to like her. Or she does it because she knows that she's going to feel okay with it. She knows she's going to have a good time. She does it, and everyone around would say she does it without any self-respect. This is a girl who gives it away without any concern for any future commitment or anything else. All right? And we have a very unpleasant word commonly used to describe such a girl who has sex without any thought of marriage or commitment or relationship. She exclusively has sex because she has a good time with it. And what do we call her?
My type of girl.
An enlightened man. We call her a slut. Sorry, ladies, it's not my fault. It's what you'd call them too.
That's true.
Okay? Now, interesting thing is, all you guys love sluts, at least once in a while. Okay? But you've pretty much all been raised and culturized to despise sluts and hate them and fear them. No one ever had their parents say to them, stay away from sluts, they're bad. Or perhaps some of you did. But you never really needed to. Because in the same way as no one ever gets taught, don't eat your playmates, cannibalism is bad. There's so much media, so many jokes about missionaries getting eaten in cauldrons, that you don't ever have to be taught that. It's taught to you by society at large. Cannibalism is bad, don't do it. I'm pretty confident no one here ever got actually taught by their parents not to eat humans. All right, now, with this in mind, you all know cannibalism is wrong and bad and nasty, except it's still done all around the world, not in what we think of as Western cultures, but except maybe in Roman Catholic churches when they're doing communion. But for the most part, hey, I mean, I've listened to the stuff they say. For the most part, cannibalism is very heavily eschewed. They say, oh, stay away from it. It's not natural. Of course, it is natural. People don't eat other people because they've been taught not to. Not recently, but over the last 10,000 years. By the same token, no one gets taught by their parents, stay away from sluts. But they know they're supposed to. Every guy says, well, of course I'd fuck her. I would marry her. Now, there's another type of woman. We've described firstly a woman who has sex with no self-respect. She gives it away. Now, there's another kind of woman. This woman has great self-respect. She charges for it. She never gives it away. She won't have sex unless she knows she's getting something for it. Be it travel or jewelry or a house over her head or food for her children or lifetime of support. What's a word for a woman who gets paid for sex? Guys, anything?
Whore.
Whore works? Prostitute
Gold
works?
digger.
Yeah.
Whatever you like. Okay? Now there are two types. So we've got sluts, and we've got whores. Now we've got two different types of whores. We've got the low status whore, the itinerant whore. We're going to call her a hoe. The hoe, not just a garden implement, the hoe is a woman who says, well, yeah, sure, he's going to take me to Hawaii. I'll fuck him. Or he's bought me a couple of great dinners and some drinks, and he's given me a bunch of rails of cocaine, or he bought me this ring, and so she'll have sex with him. So that's an itinerant, occasional, on-demand whore. Or maybe it's a girl who says, $300. Nothing wrong. That's just one role. Then there's the high status hoe, or high status prostitute. High status. We have a 4-letter word used to describe this one too. This is one we call a contract whore. There we go. A wife. A nasty 4-letter word used to describe a woman who makes a contract to sell her sexuality to just one guy in exchange for a lifetime of support for herself and her children. She doesn't even have to have sex with the guy after she's made that transaction. And fairly often she won't. Everyone hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now, sorry to say that all your moms are probably one or the other type, either sluts or whores. I mean no disrespect. I fuck both kinds. Probably not any of your mothers. I'm not going to take the time to check. Okay, but I'm not even going to check my phone. But the point is, guys, society makes this true. So now let's come back to that first kind of girl. You know, that one we've all been trained to hate. This girl is called a slut. And we all go, ooh, a slut. It's got such a bad sound to it. Although, it's fun to hang out with her for a little while. But, ooh, a slut. Such a bad thing. Girls have been so ingrained with hatred of themselves if they believe they're being slutty, that they'll go way out of their way to stop themselves from doing things they'd like to do until some way they can find to make it not count. Okay? When they can make it not count, they'll do it. Because there's really only one thing that's keeping them from doing it, and it's that they're going to feel badly about themselves. And what is it going to feel badly about? I'm going to tell you guys, they're going to feel badly because society has taught them that if a woman does what she wants to do for her own reasons, because she enjoys it, she's going to have a good time with it, she has no self-respect. Try and process that one for a minute, guys. If a woman does what she wants to do for her own reasons, she has no self-respect. Can you process that? I can't. I've been trying for a long time. Those things don't make any sense to me at all. But somehow, society is very adamant about it. Okay? If a girl exercises free will, she has no self-respect. What? Go ahead.
But is there more context? Is there more of the sexuality context?
Well, absolutely. Okay? But it's also in every other part of life. If a girl decides she wants to be a professor, move to another country, and her mother says, aren't you going to get married and raise a family? And she says, no. Her mother will condemn her. Society says, how selfish are you? You're not going to have children? Excuse me, guys, but as far as I can tell, having children is the most selfish act there is. Certainly for men. Clone yourself. That's what it is. Having children is the most selfish act you can do. Hey, once you've done it, it sure is a heavy burden. But you decide you're going to pay that burden forever because you want it that bad. This is part of the reason it's so important for us all to believe that our child is our own. Because we've decided to pay for that burden for a long, long time because we want that ego gratification of cloning ourselves. Anyone have a problem with that as an idea? Go ahead.
Is it possible to be not selfish when it comes to having kids?
Well, I want you to think about that. I want you to answer that for me, okay? I believe that every action you take throughout all of your life, even something as nice as helping an old lady across the street, is a selfish act. Everything you do because it rewards you in some way, either an immediate material way, or a sense of self way, a sense of happiness for having done something, everything you do self-servingly.
Yeah, I understand, but what I'm saying is selfish has a negative connotation, right?
Hey, I'm not even trying to get to that point. I'm saying it not as a negative thing. Everything anyone does is done selfishly. People who think that altruism means they're doing it for the common good are not paying attention to the fact that doing it for the common good makes them feel good, and they know it.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree.
This comes back to that very beginning thing. When you do nice things for people for no reward, and you get the reward of feeling good about yourself, good on you. You've done it selfishly. And that's great. But selfishness, like sluts, has a very bad reputation. But in truth, self-interest, especially what we call enlightened self-interest, or long-term selfishness, is a very, very good thing. It's the reason we do all the smart things we ever do in our lives. Go to college. It's not a short-term selfish thing, it's a long-term selfish thing. Right? Work in your job, doing a really hard job, knowing you're going to succeed eventually. That's long-term selfish. And good for you. Okay? So the answer to your question is, no, there's no way you can have children and not have it as a selfish act if you're involved in their existence. You can have children as a selfish act that's short-term selfish if you just don't bother to tell the girl you're coming, don't pull out, don't worry about whether she's on the pill, and then fuck off. That's a pretty selfish act. But then I'd hardly say you've been anything other than a sperm donor. You haven't really fathered a child in any significant way.
What of the concept of actually being in love with the girl and actually having that child as an expression of love, as a concept?
Absolutely, completely fair and completely selfish at the same time.
How so?
Well, let's see. I love Violet over here like I've never loved anyone before. She's fantastic. And if I thought that she and I could create a baby that would be a combination of the best attributes of she and I, and it would be a wonderful thing we could do for the world, and a wonderful thing we could do to cement our relationship. And I thought, okay, let's do it. Is it a selfish act? Doing it 100% with my own personal happiness, satisfaction, and gain. Now, aside from whether that's likely, it ain't. Aside from whether that's likely, I come back. Yes, having children is a very selfish act. Not that selfish is a bad thing necessarily, but you're not doing it out of a sense of duty to society, no matter who tells you you are. Now, it survives, that's what the cable's for. So, we have these two types. We have this woman who's been trained her whole life by her parents that being a slut is bad. Not only that, she doesn't just think it's bad if men think she's a slut, because in truth, if men think she's a slut, who gives a shit? She doesn't care. By the time she's reached the point in her life where she's having a good time with sex, it's nothing to her if men think she's a slut. The truth is, men describe women as either a slut or a bitch. A slut is a girl who'll fuck anybody, and a bitch is a girl who'll fuck anybody but me. Now, girl doesn't care. Okay? Now, the girl cares if other girls think of her as a slut, because they'll hate her. They'll despise her, and they'll let her know. Because a girl who allows herself to be seen as a slut, who behaves in a way that people would think of as slutty, damages other girls. It damages their viability in a marketplace in which they're working as hoes. Mommy has no worry, in a serious sense, if daddy is fucking a hoe, or a professional street hooker, or an escort. She won't be happy about it, but she'll get over it. But if daddy is fucking Rachel, the next door neighbor's 20-year-old daughter who's been putting herself through college doing babysitting for us from time to time, that's a homewrecker. She's a slut. And she's a serious threat to the power base. Because after all, mommy needs for daddy to be paying her for sex. Even if he's not getting sex. She needs for him to be paying her for sexuality, for exclusive domain. If he's getting sex for nothing, this is terrible. Can't be allowed to continue. Go ahead.
I know this is a little bit of a rare case, but what if the female makes more money or does more for the
Okay,
male?
I'm going to treat that, I'm going to say this right now. All of what I'm describing with regards to this applies now despite the sexual liberation of women, quote unquote, and the sexual rebellion, sexual revolution, quote unquote. But it really was a rebellion, guys, and we'll get to that in a minute. And I'm hoping that we can all rekindle the revolutionary ways because it's better for everyone. But to answer your question, every once in a while you'll find a woman who is independently wealthy, or at the very least makes a fortune, and is supporting the guy. And that's great. And it's a specialized case that doesn't actually apply here. I can't give you a classification, whether she's a slut or a whore, if in fact what she's doing is she's behaving as a contract whore, but providing the money. Okay? That's what it is, but I can't give you a better classification than that.
Isn't that called pimping?
Sorry?
Isn't that called pimping?
Well, let me answer that. Let's say you're making 75 grand a year as an executive of some type at some company, and your wife is a TV broadcast anchor woman for a television station making $650,000 a year. And you guys are married and you love each other. Does that make you living off the avails? Of course. If you want, good for you.
Look at Kevin Federline. Isn't that living off the event?
As far as I'm concerned it is, but I don't think of it as pimping. Now, so we come back. We have this situation. We again have women who are sluts. These are ones who we describe as having no self-respect because they make up their own mind about who they want to sleep with. Is there any man in this room who would feel he has no self-respect because he makes up his own mind with who he wants to sleep? No. Of course not. Women will complain. Guys are called studs. Girls are called sluts. It's so unfair. Well, you know what? It is. And it's unfair to you guys. Because you're the ones who suffer for it most. Because the girls are going to find guys who don't count. They're going to have all the sex they want. They're just going to do it quietly and bitch and moan about the fact that the guys who don't count don't give them the romance that they've been taught they crave. Don't give them the public approval and quality of security that comes from being established and having the status of someone who is good enough to have gotten a man to sign a contract that supports her for her life whether or not she puts out. Girl can't get a wife contract, society looks down at her. Okay? It's an odd and fairly universal thing in our culture. It's worse in other cultures. South Africa, we had huge embargoes, international embargoes on South Africa because of its terrible treatment of blacks. Remember? However, we've never talked about having embargoes against Saudi Arabia for its unbelievably bad treatment of women. Do you realize how badly, from our perspective, women are treated in many Muslim countries around the world? But since it's religion, we won't take a stand. Now, at the end of the day, it isn't really our problem. We can't really emancipate everyone in the world from everything we think is unfair. Communists, philosophical communists, believe that having to work for a living is unfair. Certainly, communists, philosophical communists, believe that marriage is slavery of women. Because once again, Engels, one of the authors of the Communist Manifesto, very cleverly pointed out that a married woman was an indentured servant to her husband, and the reason it mattered to him was so he could know his children were his own, so he could leave his estate to them. But in the communist system, where you don't get to leave your estate to your children, and in fact, your children aren't raised by your wife, your children are raised in a creche compound by people who are professionally there to raise children with a lot of other children. It doesn't really matter who your child is versus anyone else's child. Therefore, women can work alongside men. And there's true libertarian style open-mindedness and liberation for women, except it doesn't work. It doesn't work because people aren't built that way. People really do like to know their children. Women really don't like to give up their kids. Men really do like to believe, get to it, really do like to believe that their kids are their own. Your question?
I grew up in a communist country, and my parents raised me.
Oh, I believe you. I'm not talking about, I'm talking about Marxist philosophical communism, not Soviet communism or Chinese communism, where those things were all meant to happen according to the original mandate, but didn't take place. Okay?
And you're right about this, the liberation of women, because it was very free. It was a completely different vibe from over here.
Right. Okay? Women were responsible in every respect the same way men were.
That's right.
Okay? But they still had the problem of having to take care of their children. See, the feminist movement tried very hard to liberate women. Many women recognized that the social contracts women joined into were very oppressive. And they tried to find a way to liberate women so they could do the things they wanted. But all they got for their effort, because of this overriding need for people, for the men to know their children were their own, which is demonstrated again and again by things like the value of virginity at marriage, things like the value of what we call women's chastity. Now, I'm very public in saying I believe women's chastity is good public relations, but is mythical, fundamentally. This is not something I can prove. It's not something I can tell you absolutely. I'm not going to say, go to your mom, ask her if she ever had sex with someone who didn't count behind your dad's back. She probably won't tell you, and you probably don't want to know. Okay? And she may not even remember. And maybe it didn't happen. It depends on a whole lot of different factors. But I can tell you, as we all know, when a woman is good to go, for whatever reason, nothing else matters. Nothing. Your car is filthy and smells bad, no problem. Your apartment is total mess. You have no sheets on your bed, no bed. Your mattress is on the floor. Your cat box is overflowing, and you've got no condoms. No problem. Anyone here know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And so, fortunately, we're all the kind of guys who will bring out the condoms because we all keep them with us, right?
Sure, why not?
Because we aren't going to knock these poor girls up and generate babies just because the girls don't care. Right? But recognize that the reason these girls were there for you and the reason the girls were so good to go wasn't necessarily because you're beautiful and gorgeous and charming and witty. It's mostly because their standards had changed because of where they were in their ovulation, and they were good to go. Okay. Go ahead.
So really what you're saying is that all women are a combination of, who get married, all women are a combination of whore and slut.
Ultimately, I usually think this is true. For the most part, I'll come back to something I said online the other day. Someone asked me something about, someone made a comment about cheating, and I'll say I haven't cheated on anyone as long as I can remember, because I have not promised anyone that I was not going to be sleeping with other women. As a matter of fact, I have promised everyone I was going to be sleeping with other women. Go ahead.
So what you're saying is you're trying to teach us how to bring out the slut part in the woman so that we will not count.
Actually, what I'm hoping that you're going to be able to do is help women to liberate their minds so that there's no longer this choice of either being a slut or a whore.
That's all I'm saying.
But ultimately, they make their own decisions without feeling they've got no self-respect because they're making the decisions. And if they're still too caught up to make that choice, then you will be that special case
Who didn't count.
who didn't count. Go ahead.
How do you deal with women that you slept with who were married and have husbands that don't know what they're doing, so technically they're breaking a trust or whatever?
I virtually always
Yeah.
speak to them about this very gravely. I say, you made a deal, and the right thing for you to do is go home and talk to your partner and say, you know what? I recognize where our marriage has become stalled. And thank you very much for asking this right now, because it was exactly the area I was about to move into.
Is this before or after you?
Let me give you a comment here, okay? I would say it's about a 75-25 split on girls I've been to bed with who are married where I didn't know they were married. I'll admit, I didn't ask, but I didn't know. In the 25% where I did know, I would recognize that for whatever reason the girl was good to go and wanted me. And I knew I was not going to screw up her marriage. I was not about to advertise it, tell her husband, leave any evidence behind the way a woman would in your car, for example. I was not going to denote my territory in some way that would damage her position of strength and tenability in her relationship. So I wasn't doing anything except offering her an opportunity to have a good time. And in truth, if she was looking for it, it's because she needed it. It's funny, in Grosse Point Blank, the assassin explains, if I show up at your door, odds are you've done something to get me there. Go ahead.
What do you label a man that doesn't count, either from a woman's standpoint or a society standpoint, or your standpoint? Do you label them bad boy?
I wouldn't, because for the most part, most of the people who don't count aren't recognized as not counting. Do you understand what I'm saying? If I were not telling all of you about this now, you wouldn't know. Do you follow what I'm saying?
They don't exist.
We don't exist, okay? Part of the worthy part of being a worthy playboy, which is the paradigm I've been pushing for some time now, which is as opposed to a worthless playboy who spends a lot of money lavishly, takes people on trips, and hires a lot of short-term hoes, because he wants that gratification, he wants the validation from third parties that say, hey, look at the beautiful girls that I'm with. Right? But they're there because they're being paid in some immediate way. The worthy playboy is actually worthwhile. And the reason that he gets to live his playboy lifestyle is because the women don't object. Not only do they not object, they usually get really turned on by watching their worthy playboy boyfriends being charming, elegant and effective and sweet, and bringing home interesting, charming, beautiful girls. And more often than not, since I pretty much pre-approve them all to make sure that they're into girls, and by the way, ultimately, as I said in Montreal, all women are bi from at least the waist up. They like to kiss and make out with other girls. They may not admit it themselves, but the opportunity arises and it's right there. There's a playfulness. The way women connect with each other is really a lot of fun to watch and really hard to explain to your wife. No, the way women connect with each other is very sensual and usually very different from the way men do. I love listening to the girls as they giggle and titter over here. He said, here. Anyway, so, coming back to the seductive part of this, when I'm talking with a girl and I'm letting her understand that I get it, that I know one of the reasons she's having so much trouble with her lifestyle. And the reason is because our society has fucked her over, not just her, her parents, her grandparents, everybody. Our society has spent a long time beating down women. See, let's roll the clock back 150 years. Okay? Before women's lived for television or mass communication. Okay? Church is an important part of a person's life, perhaps. They know what they're supposed to do. But you see, we've always had adulterers. We've always had people who feel that they had really no choice but to do whatever. And we've pretty much always had women who've hooked up with men during their estrus and then come home to their husbands without mentioning it to them. And they've had a baby 8.5 months later, or 8 months later. The baby is 8 pounds, 7 ounces, and premature by a month. I don't know how many of you have heard about these babies, but they happen somehow. I know of one at least in the past 24 months. Fortunately, the husband was pretty sure too. Now, what's happening is the women are either by volition, with their eyes wide open and aware of it, opting to do this, or due to genetic prepositioning. They're finding someone who attracts them on a primal level. And they're hooking up with them, they're getting knocked up by them, and they're coming home and convincing their husband that they're their own child. I'll take it even further than that. In The Red Queen and a lot of other books you've probably read or seen, there are comments about the nature of why it is that humans are unique and odd, because our females do not advertise when they're in estrus. Anyone thought about why this happens? It's a really interesting thing. This is something I'm putting forward that I can't prove, but I've been speaking with fellas who are doctors and professors of anthropology, and they're all coming back to me and saying, wow, yeah, that sounds about right. But since they're not Playboy types, I don't mean the magazine, I mean like us, it's not always obvious, and they aren't necessarily thinking about it in this way. But you see, here's the thing. Let's roll the clock back any amount of time. Doesn't really matter. It could be last week, could be 10,000 years ago. Woman goes into estrus, goes out and hooks up with some guy who really turns her on. Interesting thing, I said this at Cliff's. How many people here know someone who hooked up for a long-term relationship or marriage with someone who was their type? Don't all speak at once. Who was their type. The reason it's so infrequent is because genetically, your brain says, what I want to hook up with, what I'm turned on by, is very different from what I'm used to. And this is because humans, like every other species, do better as months. We get stronger by reducing our inbreeding. Right? And so, when a girl is in estrus and ready to get mated, she goes around looking for some alpha type, someone who's there to spread the seed, who appeals to her on that subconscious level. And she hooks up with him. Now, maybe she hooks up with 10 of them, doesn't really matter. She becomes pregnant with their child. And she starts to feel a little nauseous, or maybe notices that she doesn't have her period when she's supposed to, or maybe notices her breasts are starting to hurt, or whatever. And then she goes looking for some guy who she's comfortable with. Someone that's just like someone in her family. Someone that smells like home. And she hooks up with him, and he doesn't know whether she's in estrus or not. He doesn't know that she's already taken, that she's already carrying someone else's baby. And he becomes daddy, because as far as he's concerned, he's the father. And this makes perfect genetic sense. Get the strongest seed to impregnate you, and then find the most appropriate partner to raise the child. Go ahead.
It's possible to be both.
Sometimes. I mean, certainly it's not impossible. However, like I said, the person who is your type is usually radically different. And usually the person who gives you the greatest comfort is someone who's actually very familiar. You follow?
Yeah, the humans are complex.
I'm not telling you it won't ever happen. I'm not suggesting that there aren't relationships that work between people who are radically different. But I am saying roll the dial back 150 years to the first part of this, and you'll see that this happens constantly where there's no evidence to the contrary. And it may not be the first child, it may be the second child. Because the first child, there's usually that idea of virginity specifically to prevent just this. And so, people have children that are sometimes very different. And sometimes these children are the children of ADD people, who are the players who showed up. And then the parents, who are both farmer types, have this hunter type child. And they go, oh my God, what's wrong with him? He's vibrating, he won't sit still. He can't concentrate. He's hyperactive. He must be sick. And they take him to the doctor doesn't know. Doctor's not going to say, oh, I bet your wife was fucking some guy with 100 kids. Doctor's going to say, he's got some malady. There's something wrong with him. Over the last 35 years or so, I've been diagnosed myself with minimal brain damage, which was what they called ADD when I was little, then minimal brain dysfunction, then hyperkinetic disorder, hyperactivity disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, attention deficit disorder, and now attention deficit disorder in adults. Oh, look, the squirrel, exactly. There are people who can get on the freeway every day, and they can drive for 25 kilometers to work, staring basically at the same license plate on the car in front of them the entire drive. There are some people who don't mind spending an extra $5 on gas and an equal amount of time driving 15 extra miles through the city just so they won't have that problem, because it makes them mental. Anyone here comfortable sitting and watching the car in front of them the whole drive to work? Okay, but you know what? If people weren't comfortable doing it, the roads wouldn't be full of traffic. Hey! And so here we are, a whole bunch of people who fundamentally believe that we should be doing well with women and charming and interesting and evocative. And women should like us because we know why we're here. We're here to spread the seed, guys. That's what we're here for. We need variety. We need lots and lots and lots of women to open up to us. We need this. And so we go to the trouble to figure out why it's easy for some people and harder for others. And we go to the trouble to figure out why we're having difficulty. We're not prepared to be those guys in the boat screaming at the fish. We want to be the guys who are pulling out the big fish. And so we try to find out what the score is. Now we come back to some good stuff that you'll enjoy. First thing is, when you're talking to your female friends or new girls or whatever, and you're interesting and charming and sweet, one of the things that makes you a powerful image, makes you profoundly valuable, that is not at all obvious, what you want to become is disarming. Disarming is very powerful. It makes the girl drop her defenses. How do you become disarming? You let her know you're on her side. This is not artificial. You are. Any man who goes to bed with someone he considers to be the enemy is an idiot. I never lie to my girlfriends. I would never lie to a person who's going to be sitting there in my bed while I'm asleep. I know about Lorena Bobbitt. I tell them exactly the straight dope. I let them know I understand where they're coming from. I understand what they want. I understand that they want to have recreational sex. They don't want to generate a baby with me right now. That's good. I don't want to generate a baby with them. But, you know, I don't mind going through the motions. It can be a lot of fun. And so, I give them this comfort. I let them understand the reason I'm there is the same reason they're there. They're looking at me and they're going, wow, that Johnny guy is a good guy. I know he's honest, he's sincere, I can trust him. He will always look out for me. And as I say to the girls all the time, I swear to you I will never fuck you over, but I will definitely fuck you over and over. This goes over very well, don't you think, girls? Okay. And it's the truth. Okay. And you know, I don't feel fucked over by the dozen or so girls who all told me they'd try and make it down here, who would all be able to nod in the same way, who have also been in bed with me lately, and who these girls know about. There's nothing hidden about it, because they were all doing whatever they were doing, and they didn't necessarily want to be at a big sausage fest with a bunch of guys who have no doubt tried it. But the truth is, all these girls are very free and open-minded. They're here or there or whatever it is because they've chosen to be. They all know about each other. They all trust that I'm looking out for their best interest and, of course, my own. Because I never say to someone, trust me. Trust me, as far as I know, I was raised in a family where trust me was Yiddish for fuck you. None of you is ever going to hear me say trust me. It's not in my vocabulary. I also don't say give me the benefit of the doubt or any of these things. I'll just tell you the straight dope as I know it to be. Because, hey, either you're going to believe me or you aren't. The truth is going to show everything out to be true. I've got time. Now, I tell the girls exactly what's on my mind. There's no indirection whatsoever. When I'm talking with a girl, I'm looking at her and thinking about what she's going to look like, glazed with my semen. And usually within the first 5 minutes of talking with her, I'll get that special smirk on my face and I'll smile and she'll say, what are you thinking about? I'll say, I'm looking about how pretty you're going to look glazed by my semen. It usually takes about 5 minutes. So the time I meet them and start talking to them, the time I'll say something along those lines. Not exactly that necessarily, but it usually involves my semen in their face. Ladies, can you back this up for me? And I'll tell you guys, I do this not because I'm trying to freak them out, and not because I'm trying to scare them off, and not because of anything at all, except that usually within 5 minutes I've become disarming enough in their minds. They understand that I'm talking to them as a person. An independent, freely willed person. Not some slut who I'm going to take home and then never talk to again. Not some girl who I'm going to agree to audition for so I can play the role in her life of being male lead. I'll explain that in a moment. But the girl knows that I'm here for one reason. I'm here to get to know her. And a big part of how I want to get to know her is biblically. I want to get to know what she tastes like. And I want her to get to know what I taste like. And it's very appealing because girls love sex. They really love sex. Especially if you take time to figure out how to make it any good for them. And that's worth the effort. I'm going to presume I'm in a room full of people who've already decided that they're going to make that part of their efforts. And probably have already managed to become good at it. But I can tell you that even if you're 2% better than the average man, you're already way ahead of the game. Because guys are so unspeakably lame in bed. And you know why? It's because they have so little practice. And because women don't know or want to communicate what they like. Because they've all been trained that if they know what they like, they must be sluts. And so, when you're talking to your girls, whomever they are, you just have to be comfortable with yourself. Let them know you're comfortable with them. This is incredibly disarming. It removes their anti-slut defense. It removes all their early resistance. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you guys, my last-minute resistance is always the same, and I mean every single time. If there's any at all, it's exactly the same thing. Okay? Last significant last-minute resistance I got was from a girl who was a centerfold in Perfect 10 magazine. She said, "Why me?" Do you understand? The girls all say the same thing. It's always, "Why me? You've got all these other girls." And the answer is always exactly the same. What the fuck is wrong with you? You're not hot swappable. You're not a heartbeat and a hole. You're a person. I'm interested in going to bed with you because you're you. You. Right? I'm not interested in going to bed with you because I need to get laid by some girl. There's plenty of girls. I want to go to bed with you because I like you as a person enough, and I'd like to grow closer with you in that way. I'd like to share something with you. As a matter of fact, I want to rock your world so much that you're going to invite me to decorate your smiling, happy face with my creamy affection. Not only that, you're going to let me take photos of it. Laugh while you can. And I'm talking about court justices and lawyers and talent managers and musicians and actresses and movie starlets and porn stars. It makes no difference. Help a girl feel comfortable with herself. Let her feel disarmed. Let her drop her resistance and recognize that you're offering her something in real time, in 5 minutes, that she wants. And guys, look at me. I'm about 60 pounds overweight. I'm furry. I'm balding. Okay? I do better than Frank Sinatra did during the 60s, okay?
Your shirt has one button too many, Donald. Thank you.
Hang on. Popcorn from earlier. I may actually, thank you. Okay, and so the essence of this is, you don't need to play the game in her way. You don't need to play the game in any of these contrived ways in which what you're presenting isn't you. First, fall in love with yourself. Go out and become the best you can be. Like I said, do nice things for people. Selfishly do nice things for people without asking anything from them. Because I promise you it will make you more attractive, more disarming, and more comforting. Understand where women are coming from. Understand that our society has forced them into this fucked pigeonhole, in which if they do what makes sense to them, they're bad and have to hate themselves for it. If they do what they've also been told is no good, which is to be a hoe where they're paid for sex, they have to feel no respect for themselves. But if they can coerce a man into making them a contract whore, they have status and feel good about themselves. Even if what they have done unintentionally is destroyed a beautiful, happy relationship. And I'll give you an example. Girl A is completely in love with boy A. She thinks he's wonderful. He's sweet and charming and smart, and he does well for himself at work. And he shows her he's got respect for her and cares about her, and they jump each other's bones every chance they get. And the sex is great. And they hook up. And they make a vow. Neither of them is going to have sex with anybody else from this point forward. And they move in together. And now they are a couple. And they spend almost all of their time together. When he's not at work, he's with her. And his brain is going, I love this girl, she's so great. And his penis is going, yeah, but I've already done this one. But she's really cool, and she's really sexy, and she's beautiful, and she loves me. And she really loves the sex. And so we'll go to bed again. First month, every day. Second month, almost every day. Third month, a few times a week. Fourth month, fifth month, less often than that. Other things in life take priority. You're tired at the end of the day. You're working. You've got things, goals, plans, whatever. And jumping your wife's bones, or your live-in's bones, has just become less urgent. Now, you're a well-behaved man. You know the deal, the social contract you've made. So you're not even paying attention to other girls. You come home to your wife, or your girlfriend, or both, no. You're home to your wife and your girlfriend. And you pay attention to her, you listen to her situation, and you love her, and you cherish her, but there is no sex. Even if you're having sex, there's no sexuality to it. It becomes routine. Your penis has stopped responding to you in the way that it used to, and you say, I'm just getting old. But it's not that. It's that your brain is looking for pheromones from new girls. Some of you guys will figure something out. If you go and you spend a bunch of time with women in a strip club or massage parlor, or you see an escort, or you flirt with some girl, you come home to your wife and boy, can you get it up. You've recharged your batteries. And you think, wow, that really worked. But your wife may well be of a culture or a style that says if you've gone out and gotten turned on by other girls, that's unfaithful to me. Fuck. Now I'm screwed. I love sex, but I'm totally disinterested in my spouse after only 6 months. Anyone here have this problem ever?
Meaning right now, yeah.
Well, you're all being very polite. Either most of you haven't had that long relationships, or maybe you're all just really lucky. But I can tell you I've had this problem over my life, and so I made sure that I don't have this problem anymore, and it works out much better for me. And I'll tell you that one of the really important things for a man, especially if he's a man who fundamentally is here to spread the seed, is you need that variety. Now, it's not cheating if your partner and you both agree, and there's buy-in, that you can go out and have sex with other people. The thing is, the girl has to understand that she gains your continued sexual enthusiasm. Go ahead, Jack.
What you're saying is very true, and I agree. The problem is, women don't see it that way. I'm a woman, and I see it that way, the way men see it. And it's true, men are here on earth to spread the seed.
In fact,
Women cannot register. They can't. It's just
can you?
naturally.
Can you understand it?
Oh, I perfectly understand.
What makes you so special?
Are you a woman? I'm a woman.
You're a woman and you understand it. So just a moment ago.
You have to come to terms and you have to understand men.
Right, so.
Until you do.
Absolutely right.
You're frustrated, you will.
Absolutely right. So I'm going to tell you how I solved this problem. Because not one girl that I'm involved with now, not one girl, had come to terms with it on her own before I talked to her.
No, I talk to many women and they look at me, you've got to be crazy.
Exactly.
What's wrong with you?
So you tell the women.
That's how you're going to keep them.
You-
Send them off, let them smell it, look at it, touch it. You never know if it happened. If he's coming home and he's happy with a smile, you guys are together, isn't really that the bottom line?
Now, this is very wise. Now, I take it to a further place. Because you see, I'm very big on honesty and openness.
And
Very big on it. And open doesn't mean you're in a relationship which you get to fuck around. Open is more like glasnost. Open means you tell them the truth. You share what's going on in your head. When you have a relationship with someone and you say to them the terms under which you want them to live, and they say, okay. If they don't actually buy into your terms, they will fuck you over. I'll give you an example that happened to a dear friend. This particular friend made a deal with her boyfriend that he was not to view pornography of any sort, because to do so was the same as cheating on her. And he agreed. But he worked in the internet business, so it didn't take very long before it was impossible. And once he'd gotten to the point where he knew that just viewing pornography was tantamount to being disowned because he was cheating on her, then he might as well fuck around. And that's what he did. And so she needed to wrap her head around this because it was something she brought upon herself. She made an unrealistic deal, and she insisted this had to be followed. And of course, since it couldn't be followed, it led to the demise of the relationship. Well, guess what, guys? All you guys out there who think about the women in your lives and say, I want a bunch of women, but I want them all to be exclusive to me. Or even if you say, I just want one woman, but I want her to be exclusive to me. That's not in her nature.